observation. One of the works that I've been very interested in is Picasso's Weeping Woman, which is in the Tate collection, but is on loan at the moment in Scotland. Part of what interests me about this painting is actually the idea of it as a national treasure, something that belongs in one way to a continental history of painting, and on the other hand belongs very much to the late 20th century British psyche, and has come to signify our own highly developed cultural landscape, like it's some kind of proof. The fact that it's in Scotland at the moment means that it's not really available literally for observation in the gallery here, which makes it an interesting starting point for me in thinking about observation per se. When I'm making work, I don't use observational drawing, for example, but I use memories of things I've seen or experienced visually, and sometimes I've scrutinised these things very closely or repeatedly. Sometimes I've seen them only fleetingly. I'm invested in the idea of looking at things askance, I think, sort of indirect observation, which somehow lets elements of a scene slip into your thoughts uninvited. I think certain powerful images are almost impossible to look at full in the face. For me, at least. And one of the things that I find quite problematic about The Weeping Woman is that it, in terms of its making as a narrative or an interpretation of it as a painting that's produced out of Guernica, Picasso's painting of the Spanish Civil War. And in that painting he does a series of, for that painting he does a series of drawings of weeping women, and then subsequently he makes this painting of the Weeping Woman and several others. And some critics have talked about it as a painting of a witness at a distance, registering the pain of the event. So the painting is actually of the Weeping Woman is of a woman called Dora Maar, who was his partner and also an artist, and a very kind of chic Parisian woman. So one interpretation was that this is an observer being observed in the moment at which they take on the emotional impact of a scene that they are a witness to, but at a remove. I don't know quite where that leads me in terms of thinking about observation. And I think I had really wanted to talk about observation as something which is very active and kind of penetrating, but I've ended up in this strange place where the language attached to observation is very complicated. The words like penetration, the image of Dora Maar weeping, which I myself think of as a nude, is a picture that's got a real brutality about it, because it is precisely an artist watching something full in the face, someone full in the face, disintegrating. So the artist's view is a kind of, and the viewer's view is really searing, kind of unpleasant vision for me. So anyway, I wanted to propose it as a painting that has, for me, lots of things about it which are interesting in relation to the idea of observation, both in terms of being an artist and a viewer, and on a broader level, the idea of observation or being a witness, the idea of observation as witnessing. On another note, I was thinking about an artist whose work is also in the Tate collection, Eva Hess, and this is addendum from 1967, and this is an untitled pen and ink drawing, also from the same year. And she began as a painter and then moved to being a sculptor. And the moment when that change happened was in Germany, and she was there because of her husband, who was also a sculptor, who had a residency in Germany, and she went to stay with him and was given a studio in an old textiles factory. And she began to make a series of drawings that related to objects that were left strewn around on the floor in the factory. So these were kind of machines, little bits of machines, little bits of kind of discarded mechanical detritus. And from these started to make reliefs. And I was thinking about the idea of observation as something which is, in itself, it sort of has an association, and there is an idea attached to it which is about something mechanical, something mechanized, that you are observing something without trying to, something scientific, not trying to change the thing that you're looking at, but trying to simply kind of objectively observe it. And I guess the metaphor for that is a piece of machinery, like a video camera or a camera. And she goes on to then kind of take out of these drawings reliefs, so kind of a hybrid between a painting and sculpture. And one of the kind of significant prompts for that shift is the work that she sees in Germany. So she's sort of working in one way from observation in terms of the objects that just happen to be in her immediate environment that she's working in, which is quite conventional. It's quite a conventional kind of artistic process, I think, or conventional in the sense of conventional since the 19th century, since Impressionism, perhaps. And then also the other kind of context is the art context in Europe and specifically in Germany, and she sees some pieces by Kirchwitters, Duchamp, but also some American artists who are showing in Germany at that time, and that kind of prompts this interest in relief sculptures. I'm going to leave it there because we'll talk a bit more about her under another heading, but. Yeah. Okay.
I think, sort of with regards to kind of observation, I think it's something that's so kind of fundamental to the experience of art. But I'm sort of trying to think about it in a more kind of sort of abstract sense, because there are all these kind of sort of formal constructs in terms of the dynamics of kind of observation, particularly in relation to the notion of just sort of seeing and some of the dynamics that sets up in terms of, if you think about an idea of kind of sort of a kind of sort of voyeurism, or the notion of the kind of sort of panorama, being able to kind of sort of all-seeing eye, the kind of positioning of observation. But I think at a sort of fundamental level, that notion of it as a kind of sort of tool for experiencing something, for engaging with something, for acquiring or entering some kind of conversation or dialogue, is when I think it's most kind of fruitful and active. And I think often I think observation is sort of, particularly in a lot of kind of contemporary kind of sort of art parlance, has been sort of slightly denigrated, as it's seen as maybe as something that's kind of sort of quite passive. And there's been this kind of sort of push towards this kind of idea of interactivity through a kind of sort of direct, maybe kind of sort of physical engagement with something. And actually it was sort of, I'm kind of always interested in the idea that, observation is intrinsically kind of interactive and participatory, and that idea of kind of closely observing something is actually very kind of engrossing and very, dynamic in terms of trying to kind of penetrate, whether it's a piece of work or a kind of an idea or concept or something that's being kind of presented or communicated to me. strikes me as something that is very challenging and kind of generates a lot of kind of energy. Well, it does for me anyway. So I think I'm sort of interested in that sort of the dynamism that maybe sort of comes from the notion of observing and it being a kind of an active experience.